Millionaire finds this 6-year-old girl on a house roof in flooded town, but she falls into the water, and unfortunately, this happens. Comment. What you think will happen, your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The rain had been hammering down relentlessly on Willow Creek for 3 days. Theodora Vargas, 42, watched the terrifyingly rising waters from the window of her mansion, trying to maintain composure on the phone with her assistant. Her fingers drummed nervously on the mahogany desk in her study, but her voice remained firm, a trait that had made her known in the business world. "Cancel all appointments for the week. The situation is critical," she ordered, before hanging up, her dark brown eyes fixed on the stormy sky, which seemed to be dumping its entire contents onto the small town. Theodora was known for her reserved and determined personality, characteristics that had helped her build a respectable business empire. Extremely methodical, controlling, and above all, a woman who never showed vulnerability. Her life was structured around meetings, spreadsheets, and negotiations, with her only constant companion being her fiancé, Jerome Menezes, a businessman as pragmatic as she was. The deafening sound of the rain was broken by a crash. The businesswoman ran to the balcony and saw, horrified, that the nearby dam had broken. A violent mass of water surged towards the town, swallowing everything in its path. Her heart raced as she realized she had only minutes before the flood hit her property. With trembling hands, she picked up her phone to call Jerome, but the lines were already dead. The power flickered several times before going out completely. In the sudden darkness, Theodora felt, for the first time in many years, the weight of genuine fear. Running to the garage, she mentally thanked herself for having bought a small boat a few months earlier, indulging a whim of Jerome's, who insisted on taking it out on the regional lake. Now, that luxury item might save her life. The water was already reaching her ankles when she managed to start the engine. The level was rising with terrifying speed, and Theodora barely had time to untie the mooring lines before the garage began to flood. She maneuvered the vessel out, immediately being hit by the force of the current. It was then that she heard it. Amidst the chaos of the storm and the roar of the waters, a thin, desperate cry cut through the air. Theodora turned her head in every direction, searching for the source of the sound until her eyes found a scene she would never forget. On the roof of a house on the verge of collapsing, a small figure clung to a chimney. It was a girl, no more than 6 years old, and, in her arms, she clutched a soaked rag doll tightly. Her large, frightened eyes met Theodora's, transmitting a silent plea for help. The businesswoman felt her heart tighten. Her entire life had been built on rational, calculated decisions, but in that moment, something stronger compelled her to act. She maneuvered the boat against the current, trying to approach the house. The structure was starting to give way, and small pieces of roofing slid into the turbulent water. "Hold on!" Theodora shouted, fighting to keep control of the vessel. "I'll get you out of there!" The girl didn't respond, but her eyes didn't leave Theodora's for a second. When the boat finally got close enough, Theodora reached out her arms. "Jump! I'll catch you!" A particularly strong gust of wind shook the vessel just as the girl was preparing to jump. Theodora saw, as if in slow motion, the small body lose its balance and fall into the dark water, disappearing instantly. Without a second thought, Theodora jumped. The icy water enveloped her like 1,000 needles, and the current was much stronger than she had imagined. Her eyes stung as she tried to see something in the murky waters. Her lungs burned, begging for air, but she kept diving. Finally, her hands found fabric. She pulled with all her might and felt the girl's small body. With a desperate surge, she managed to surface, bringing the child with her. The girl was conscious, but her lips were blue with cold. It was then that Theodora realized they had been swept far from the boat. The current carried them further and further into the center of the flood, and there was nothing they could cling to. Holding the girl firmly against her chest with one arm, Theodora tried to swim with the other, but it was like fighting against an unstoppable force of nature. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to keep the girl conscious. "Olivia," she replied, in a whisper, still clutching the soaked doll. "It's going to be okay, Olivia," Theodora promised, even though she didn't know if she could keep that promise. "I won't let go of you." The following hours became a fight for survival. Theodora lost all sense of time, focused only on keeping Olivia and herself above water. Her muscles screamed with exhaustion, and the cold began to numb her movements. It was when her strength was about to give out that she heard the sound of an engine. Through the curtain of rain, she saw a small fishing boat approaching. The voices of the men seemed distant, as if from a dream. Theodora felt strong hands pulling her up, along with Olivia. It was only when she was safe in the boat that she allowed exhaustion to overcome her. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was Olivia's pale face, still clutching her rag doll, her large eyes fixed on her with an expression that mixed fear and gratitude. What Theodora didn't know was that this rescue would change her life forever, in ways she never could have imagined. The flood that had devastated Willow Creek had not only destroyed physical structures, but was also about to tear down the walls she had carefully built around her heart. The fluorescent light of the hospital room stung Theodora's eyes when she finally regained consciousness. The smell of antiseptic and the monotonous beeping of machines filled the room. She tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through her spine, eliciting an involuntary groan. "Don't try to move, Ms. Vargas," the gentle voice of Nurse Rosalind sounded beside her. "You suffered a serious spinal injury during the rescue." The words hit Theodora like a punch to the gut. "Injury? What kind of injury?" "The doctor will be here to talk to you soon," Rosalind replied, avoiding her gaze. "But first, I need to inform you that someone is very anxious to see you." The door opened, and Jerome entered, his impeccable suit contrasting with the tense expression on his face. At 45, he maintained a distinctive appearance, with graying temples that gave him an air of authority. "My dear, what in the world were you thinking?" he approached, his voice mixing concern and reproach. "Diving into a flood? You could have died. The girl." Theodora tried to sit up again, ignoring the pain. "Olivia, where is she? How is she?" "The girl is alive, thanks to you," Jerome replied, his tone subtly changing. "But Theodora, we need to talk about the consequences of this impulsive act of yours." Before he could continue, Dr. Robert Adams entered the room. His tired face and the way he held his clipboard already indicated that the news wouldn't be good. "Miss Vargas, I'll be direct," he began, adjusting his glasses. "Impact with submerged debris during the rescue caused a severe injury to your spine. We've stabilized the situation, but you've temporarily lost mobility in your legs." The world seemed to freeze around Theodora. Temporarily. Her voice was barely a whisper. "With intensive physical therapy and a lot of effort, there's a possibility of partial or even total recovery," the doctor explained. "But it will be a long and painful process. We're talking months, maybe a year or more." Jerome ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. "And our wedding? It's scheduled for 6 months from now." Theodora barely registered her fiancé's words, her mind focused on a single question. "I need to see Olivia. How is she?" Dr. Adams hesitated before answering. "The girl is physically fine, but she developed severe trauma. She hasn't spoken a word since she was rescued." "And her parents?" Theodora asked. "That's another delicate matter," the doctor replied. "We haven't been able to locate any relatives. She'll be transferred to—" "No," Theodora interrupted. surprising everyone with the vehemence in her voice. "She's staying with me." "Have you lost your mind?" Jerome exploded. "You can barely take care of yourself, and you want to take responsibility for a traumatized child. It's the least I can do," Theodora replied, her voice firm despite the pain. "She has no one, Jerome. Do you have any idea what this means? For our lives, for our plans." He approached the bed, lowering his voice. "You're a respected businesswoman, not a babysitter, and now, more than ever, you need to focus on your recovery." At that moment, a different nurse entered the room, leading a silent Olivia by the hand. The girl still held the rag doll, now dry but stained by the floodwater. Her large brown eyes met Theodora's, and something inexplicable passed between them. Olivia let go of the nurse's hand and ran to the bed, stopping beside Theodora. Without saying a word, she held out the doll towards her, as if offering her most precious possession. "Thank you, dear." Theodora smiled, feeling unexpected tears well up in her eyes. It was then that she noticed something falling from the doll's dress, a folded paper, partially destroyed by the water. Jerome picked up the paper before anyone could react. "It's an address," he said, frowning, "and a name, Ambrose." Theodora felt her heart race. Ambrose Tavares was her main business competitor, owner of the largest supermarket chain in the region, the same one she had been trying to buy for years. "This changes everything," Theodora murmured, her mind already working through the possibilities. "Dr. Adams, I want to start physical therapy immediately, and I need to make some adjustments to my house." "Theodora, be reasonable," Jerome tried to argue. "You can't." "I can, and I will," she interrupted him, her voice carrying that tone her employees knew well, the one that indicated a decision had been made and was final. "Olivia needs a safe place, and I need to understand what her connection is to Ambrose." That night, after everyone had left, Theodora watched Olivia sleeping on the couch next to her bed. The girl had a restless sleep, her small hands clutching the doll as if her life depended on it. In the dim light of the room, Theodora made a silent promise. She would uncover the truth behind the mystery of that child, even if it meant confronting her biggest business rival. What she didn't know was that this decision would trigger a series of events that would transform not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. The stained doll held more secrets than she could have imagined, and the name Ambrose was just the tip of a thread that, once pulled, would unravel truths capable of shaking the power structures in Willow Creek. As the night wore on, and the rain finally relented, Theodora began to realize that her life, until then so meticulously planned, was about to follow paths she never would have chosen. Her wheelchair, still parked in the corner of the room as a silent reminder of her new reality, would be just the first of many challenges she would have to face. Outside the hospital, Jerome made a call. "Mr. Tavares, we need to talk about a sensitive matter. Your granddaughter just showed up." 3 weeks passed since Theodora left the hospital. The mansion, once a symbol of her independence and success, now felt like a labyrinth of obstacles. Ramps had been installed, furniture rearranged, and her meticulously planned routine had turned into a sequence of adaptations and painful discoveries. That morning, as she watched Olivia silently playing in the garden through the window of her adapted office, Theodora tried to focus on the financial reports on her desk. Her company's stock had suffered a significant drop since her temporary absence, and rumors about her condition were starting to affect investor confidence. "Ma'am?" Antonia, her trusted housekeeper for 15 years, entered after knocking softly. "The physical therapist Dorothy Santos is here." Theodora sighed, mentally preparing for another session of excruciating exercises. Dorothy Santos, a 58-year-old woman with kind eyes and firm hands, was unlike any health professional she had ever met. She wasn't intimidated by Theodora's social status, nor impressed by her attempts to control the recovery process. "Good morning, Theodora," Dot entered, her warm smile contrasting with the seriousness of her assessing gaze. "How's the pain today?" "Manageable," Theodora replied dryly, trying to hide a grimace as she maneuvered her wheelchair. "Manageable means unbearable in your vocabulary, doesn't it?" Dot began setting up the equipment for the session. "And how is our little Olivia?" Theodora's gaze instinctively returned to the window. "Still not talking, but yesterday she smiled for the first time. It was just for a second while we were feeding the birds, but—" Her voice trailed off, surprised by her own emotion. Dot stopped what she was doing and watched her patient carefully. "You know, Theodora, sometimes the biggest changes in our lives come disguised as tragedies," the physical therapist commented, helping her position herself on the mat. "This girl is healing something in you, even if you don't realize it yet." Before Theodora could reply, Antonia returned quickly to the office. "Ma'am, Mr. Jerome is here, and he brought Mr. Ambrose Tavares." Theodora's heart pounded. After 3 weeks of frustrated attempts to contact Ambrose, he was finally here, and with Jerome, of all people. "Ask them to wait in the living room," she ordered, trying to maintain her composure. "Dot, can we postpone the session?" "Absolutely not," the physical therapist replied firmly. "Let them wait. Your recovery is more important than any business meeting." 40 minutes later, Theodora entered the living room, her hair pulled back in an impeccable bun, and her face lightly made, up to hide the sweat from the exercise. Jerome and Ambrose stood up when they saw her, but their eyes fixed uncomfortably on the wheelchair. Ambrose Tavares was a 65-year-old man, white-haired with a rigid posture that betrayed his years in the army before becoming a businessman. His face, usually impassive during negotiations, revealed an unusual anxiety. "Theodora, my dear." Jerome stepped forward, trying to kiss her, but she subtly turned her face away. "I brought Mr. Tavares here to clarify the situation with the girl." "What situation would that be?" Theodora asked, her voice controlled. "The same one Mr. Tavares vehemently denied when my lawyer contacted you?" Ambrose cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Ms. Vargas, I came personally to ask you to stop your investigation into the girl. It's a delicate matter." "Delicate?" Theodora raised an eyebrow. "A traumatized child, without family, with your name and address hidden in—" "Her doll is just delicate?" At that moment, a noise at the door drew everyone's attention. Olivia was standing there, her large eyes fixed on Ambrose. The businessman visibly paled. "Olivia, dear," Theodora called gently, "do you know this gentleman?" The girl didn't answer, but her whole body trembled. She ran behind Theodora's chair, clinging to the back as if seeking protection. "This is ridiculous." Ambrose stood up abruptly. "I came here out of consideration to avoid a scandal, but I see it was a mistake." "Scandal?" Theodora felt her anger rise. "The only scandal I see is a powerful man denying any connection to a child clearly linked to him." "Theodora," Jerome intervened, his smooth voice hiding a threat. "Be reasonable. You're recovering. You need to focus on your health. Let me handle this situation." It was then that Theodora noticed something that had escaped her in her initial anger, the familiarity between Jerome and Ambrose. The way they looked at each other, how they seemed to share a silent understanding. "How long have you two been plotting behind my back?" she asked, her voice cutting like ice. "Plotting is a strong word," Jerome smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's say I'm protecting your interests, since you are temporarily indisposed." At that moment, Antonia rushed into the room again. "Ma'am, there's a woman at the back door. She says she worked for Mr. Tavares and has information about the girl." Ambrose's face lost all color. "Don't let that woman in. She's a liar. Antonia," Theodora interrupted, her eyes fixed on Ambrose. "Bring her here, now." "This is a mistake," Jerome warned, stepping next to Ambrose. "Theodora, think about your reputation, our company." "Our company?" Theodora laughed without humor. "Interesting you mention that. Antonia, please also ask them to bring my laptop. I think it's time to reveal some suspicious transfers I discovered recently." The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia, still clinging to Theodora's chair, began to tremble more strongly. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, she pointed to a folder that had fallen from Ambrose's jacket during his earlier agitation. Theodora followed the girl's gaze and saw a partially visible photo slipping from the folder. Her heart stopped for a moment. It was the same woman Olivia compulsively drew in her alone moments. The tension in the room was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. An elderly woman, about 70, wearing a simple housekeeper's uniform, entered accompanied by Antonia. Her tired eyes scanned the room until they fixed on Ambrose. "Stella," he murmured, as if seeing a ghost. "You promised." "I promised silence. In exchange for my sick grandson's pension," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "But I can't carry this weight anymore, not after what happened to Cleopatra." The name seemed to electrify the room. Olivia, for the first time in 3 weeks, made a sound, a small sob that broke everyone's heart. "Who is Cleopatra?" Theodora asked, although something within her already knew the answer. Stella straightened her shoulders, as if gathering all her courage. "Cleopatra worked at Mr. Tavares's supermarket, and she was also the person who loved this girl most in the world, before she was forced to disappear." The silence that followed Stella's declaration was broken only by the sound of the rain starting again outside, as if the sky itself wanted to participate in that moment of revelations. Theodora held Olivia's trembling hand, the girl now crying silently. "Go on, Stella," Theodora encouraged, ignoring the silent protests from Jerome and Ambrose. "I want to know everything about Cleopatra." The elderly woman sat down, her wrinkled hands gripping her worn apron. "Cleopatra started working at the supermarket 7 years ago. She was a beautiful, intelligent young woman, studying administration at night. That's when she met Miles, Mr. Tavares's son." Ambrose stepped forward threateningly. "Enough, Stella." "No, Mr. Tavares," the housekeeper's voice gained strength. "Enough with the secrets. You might have bought me with my grandson's pension, but after I saw in the papers that this girl had survived the flood, I can't stay silent anymore." Theodora watched Olivia, who had stopped crying and was now staring intently at Stella, as if each word were a piece of a puzzle she was trying to assemble in her silent mind. "Miles and Cleopatra fell in love," Stella continued. "It was a true love, the kind you only see in movies. But Mr. Tavares already had other plans for his son, an arranged marriage with the mayor's daughter, which would secure million-dollar contracts for the supermarkets. And when Cleopatra got pregnant," Theodora finished, beginning to understand. "Mr. Tavares offered her an absurd amount of money to disappear from town," Stella confirmed, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "But Cleopatra refused to do what he wanted. She fled, had Olivia in secret, and for years managed to keep her hidden, raising the girl alone in a neighboring town." Jerome, who had maintained a calculated expression until then, intervened. "That's very moving, but what proof do you have?" Stella took a crumpled envelope from her apron pocket. "Cleopatra contacted me last week, before the flood. She was desperate, said she had discovered something about Mr. Tavares's and Mr. Menezes's businesses. She left these photos and documents with me for safekeeping." Theodora took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, she found old photos of a young woman very similar to Olivia, next to a young man she recognized as Miles Tavares as well, as documents that appeared to be records of suspicious bank transactions. "Where is Cleopatra now?" Theodora asked, although she feared the answer. Nobody knows, Stella replied. The night before the flood, she left Olivia with a neighbor while she went to the capital to look for work. When the flood came, Olivia, who had been motionless until then, suddenly moved. She went to her doll, which was on the couch, and took another paper from the small pocket in the doll's dress. It was a water-stained note, but still legible. My daughter, Mommy will be back soon. If anything happens, find Grandpa Ambrose. He might not love me, but he'll love you. With love, Mommy. Theodora felt her heart wrench. The girl had kept this secret all this time, too traumatized to speak, but conscious enough to understand the gravity of the situation. You monster! Theodora turned to Ambrose, her voice trembling with rage. You knew this the whole time. That's why you were so desperate to stop me from investigating. It was then that Antonia burst into the room again, her face pale. Ma'am, there's something you need to see on the television, now, with a command. From the remote, the large TV in the room turned onto the local news channel. The headline made everyone's blood run cold. Investigation reveals tax fraud scheme involving region's largest supermarket chain. Theodora Vargas, main competitor, named as mastermind of scheme. What nonsense is this? Theodora exclaimed, but then she saw the satisfied smile on Jerome's face. I tried to warn you, my dear, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. You should have focused on your recovery instead of playing detective. You set this whole thing up? Theodora asked, understanding hitting her like lightning. Actually, Jerome approached, lowering his voice, it was surprisingly easy. All it took was using your personal laptop while you were in the hospital, planting some evidence, making some transfers. You were always so predictable with your passwords, dear. Ambrose looked as surprised as Theodora. This wasn't part of our agreement, Jerome. Agreement? Theodora laughed bitterly. So you really were plotting. Why? Because you're an obstacle, Jerome replied simply. Your principles, your stubbornness in not selling your chain of stores. You were getting in the way of bigger plans. The flood was a perfect opportunity to make some necessary changes. At that moment, Dot, who had remained discreetly in the room since her arrival, stepped forward. I think everyone should hear this, she said, raising her cell phone. From the device, a recording began to play. It was Jerome's voice in a conversation with Ambrose days earlier, detailing the entire plan to frame Theodora. I always record my sessions, Dot explained, smiling at the shock on Jerome's face. Professional security, and you two talk very loudly in the garden. Before anyone could react, the doorbell rang. Antonia, still stunned by the events, opened the door to find a local news team accompanied by a group of small business owners from the town. Ms. Vargas, said Maria, owner of a traditional market, we've come to bring proof of Mr. Tavares's abusive and illegal practices at his supermarkets. And also, she hesitated, looking at Stella, we've brought news about Cleopatra. Theodora's heart raced, while Olivia, for the first time in weeks, took a voluntary step forward, her eyes fixed on Maria. The storm outside increased its intensity, as if foreshadowing that the true revelations were yet to come. The living room of Theodora's mansion, which had always been an environment of cold, calculated negotiations, now overflowed with emotion. Maria entered, followed by other local merchants and the news crew, who immediately began recording the scene. Jerome tried to slip away discreetly, but two sturdy suppliers blocked the door. "Cleopatra is alive!" Maria announced, her words prompting an audible sob from Olivia. "She's in a riverside community about 4 hours from here, working as a volunteer teacher." Theodora felt her hands tremble on the controls of her wheelchair. How did you find out?" "My sister Salome lives in that area," Maria explained. When we started gathering evidence against Mr. Tavares's dirty business, she recognized Cleopatra in one of the old photos. The poor woman arrived there after receiving threats, not knowing her daughter had survived the flood. Olivia, who had remained static beside Theodora, suddenly began to tremble. Her small fingers gripped Theodora's hand tightly, and for the first time in weeks, her voice emerged, weak but clear. "Mommy." The sound of that single word seemed to alter the entire atmosphere of the room. Theodora pulled the girl onto her lap, holding her tightly while silent tears streamed down both their faces. "This is very touching," Jerome's sarcastic voice cut through the moment, "but it still doesn't change the fact that Theodora is under investigation for tax fraud. The evidence is irrefutable." "About that." A man stepped forward, carrying a folder. It was Charlie Edwards, former accountant for Ambrose's supermarkets. "I have documents here that prove the fraud was orchestrated by Mr. Menezes, using forged access to Ms. Vargas's company system." Ambrose, who had been unusually quiet, finally exploded. "You traitor! You promised it was a perfect plan to get rid of the competition." "And you promised no one would get hurt," Jerome retorted, his mask of civility finally dropping. "But you tried to make your own granddaughter disappear. How many other Cleopatras have you hidden over the years, Ambrose?" The news crew recorded everything avidly, while Dot silently continued recording on her phone. It was then that a new character entered the scene. Miles Tavares, who had just returned urgently from an overseas trip after receiving an anonymous call about the events. "Father?" Miles's voice trembled as he saw Ambrose. "Is it true? Cleopatra, the pregnancy, you made me believe she had." "I did what was necessary," Ambrose shouted, his face red with fury. "You were going to throw away your future because of an employee. The marriage to the mayor's daughter was our chance to expand your dirty business?" Maria interrupted, throwing a pile of documents onto the table. "Here's the proof of how you stifled small businesses, using bribes and threats to monopolize the market." Miles staggered, his eyes finding Olivia, for the first time, who was watching him intently from Theodora's lap. The resemblance between father and daughter was undeniable. "She has your eyes," Theodora said softly, gesturing for Miles to approach. Olivia, however, hid her face in Theodora's shoulder, still frightened by so many revelations. The businesswoman felt her heart ache. In just a few weeks, that silent girl had become more important to her than any business or ambition. "Ms. Vargas," Charlie Edwards called out, "there's one more thing you need to know. We found records of suspicious transfers to a construction company. They were planning to demolish your mansion to build a mall." "What?" Theodora's eyes widened. "Why do you think your fiancé insisted so much for you to sign a power of attorney before leaving the hospital?" the accountant revealed. "Fortunately, you were cautious enough to refuse." Jerome tried to approach the door one more time, but was restrained. His face, previously always controlled, now showed pure panic. "It's over, Jerome," Theodora said, her voice carrying a strength she hadn't felt in weeks. "You and Ambrose will answer for everything." It was at this moment that a particularly loud clap of thunder shook the mansion's windows. The lights flickered, and for an instant everyone fell silent. When the power stabilized, Antonia ran into the room. "Ma'am! The dam! They say it could break again. The town is starting to evacuate the low-lying areas." The panic was immediate. The news crew rushed out to cover the new emergency, while the merchants began to disperse to protect their establishments. In the confusion, Jerome managed to escape, disappearing into the torrential rain. "We need to go too," Dot said, approaching with Theodora's wheelchair. "But where to?" "To the riverside community," Theodora replied without hesitation, "to find Cleopatra." "I'm coming with you," Miles declared, his voice choked. I need to fix my mistakes." "No!" Ambrose's voice thundered. "You're not going anywhere. I won't let you destroy everything I've built because of—" His words were interrupted by a sound no one expected to hear. Olivia, still on Theodora's lap, began softly singing a lullaby, the same one Cleopatra used to sing to her every night. The sound of the child's voice seemed to melt something in Ambrose's hardened heart. He stumbled to a chair, covering his face with his hands, while silent sobs shook his shoulders. "Let's go," Theodora said, holding Olivia's hand tightly. "We have a family to reunite." As the storm raged, outside, the small group prepared for a journey that would change their lives forever. Theodora looked at Olivia, who now held her doll with one hand and Miles's hand with the other, and realized that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. "Dot!" Theodora called out, as Miles helped her get into the adapted car. "Do you think we can make it there in this rain?" The physical therapist smiled, a determined glint in her eyes. "Darling, after everything you've faced, a storm is the least of our problems." What they didn't know was that Jerome, soaked and furious, was watching everything from a distance, making one last call that would completely change the course of events. The real storm was yet to come. The road leading to the riverside community was virtually impassable. The rain lashed the windshield of the adapted car, where Miles drove with extreme caution, while Theodora held Olivia on her lap in the back seat. Dot constantly checked the GPS, and Stella, who had insisted on accompanying them, murmured prayers softly. "The bridge," Dot suddenly warned. "It's almost submerged." Miles stopped the car a few yards from the wooden bridge connecting the main road to the riverside community. The river's waters, usually calm, now roared threateningly beneath the fragile structure. "We can't cross there," Miles declared, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "It's too dangerous." It was then that they saw lights approaching in the rearview mirror, 3 cars speeding towards them. Theodora's heart pounded as she recognized the first vehicle. "Jerome," she whispered, instinctively hugging Olivia tighter. The cars stopped near theirs, and Jerome got out, accompanied by men Theodora recognized as security from Ambrose's supermarkets. The heavy rain couldn't hide the look of fury on his face. "Did you really think I'd let you ruin everything?" he shouted over the noise of the storm. "That riverside community? I bought that land months ago. It's going to be the site of the state's largest commercial center." "What are you talking about?" Theodora questioned as Miles got out of the car to confront Jerome. "Why do you think Cleopatra was getting threats?" Jerome laughed bitterly. "She was organizing the residents against the expropriation. That idiotic little teacher was messing up $1 million project." At that moment, a deafening sound cut through the air. The bridge began to give way under the force of the current. Theodora looked frantically to the other side of the river, where small lights indicated the community's presence. "Mommy is there," Olivia whispered, her small voice filled with fear. As if responding to the girl's words, a car appeared from the other side of the bridge. It was an old pickup truck, and even through the curtain of rain, Theodora could see a woman at the wheel, her features strikingly similar to Olivia's. "Cleopatra!" Stella cried, immediately recognizing her old friend. The pickup truck began to cross the bridge slowly, while pieces of the structure collapsed into the turbulent waters. Jerome, seeing his plans crumbling, gestured to his men. "Don't let her get across. If she finds the girl, everyone will find out about the land." Miles reacted instantly, running to stop Jerome's men. In the ensuing confusion, Theodora realized she had to make a decision. With a superhuman effort, she transferred herself to her wheelchair. "Dot, hold Olivia," she ordered, starting to move her chair towards the bridge. "Theodora, no!" the physical therapist shouted, but it was too late. Using all the strength that months of physical therapy had built in her arms, Theodora advanced onto the unstable bridge. The wood groaned under the wheels of her chair, while the rain lashed her face. Cleopatra, seeing her approaching, stopped the pickup truck. "Who are you?" she shouted, getting out of the vehicle. Someone your daughter helped find her true strength, Theodora replied, feeling the bridge tremble beneath them. At that moment, a scream cut through the air. Olivia had escaped from Dot's arms and was running onto the bridge, ignoring the danger. "Mummy!" Time seemed to freeze. Cleopatra, hearing her daughter's voice for the first time in months, began to run towards the sound. The entire bridge shuddered, and an ominous crack indicated the structure was about to collapse. Theodora acted instinctively. She propelled her chair with all her might, reaching Olivia in the middle of the bridge and pulling her onto her lap, just as an entire section of the structure collapsed behind them. "Hold on," she shouted, using every ounce of strength she possessed to move the chair towards Cleopatra. A few yards away, Miles managed to overpower Jerome's men, while Dot, showing surprising agility, immobilized Jerome himself with a move she had learned in her self-defense classes. The bridge continued to collapse behind Theodora and Olivia, like a zipper opening over the furious waters. With one last desperate push, they reached Cleopatra, who grabbed the wheelchair and pulled them all into the safety of her pickup truck. The rest of the bridge collapsed completely, taking Jerome's plans and the last vestige of the corrupt empire he and Ambrose had built with it. 6 months later, the sun shone over the new community park built where Theodora's mansion once stood. Children played on the swings, while residents from the riverside community, now legal owners of their land, sold products at a market organized by the new local cooperative. Theodora, leaning on a cane, watched the scene with a smile. Her recovery had progressed extraordinarily, motivated by the desire to be able to play with Olivia in the park. Beside her, Cleopatra organized the final details for the inauguration of the community school, where she now officially taught. "I still can't believe you turned your mansion into all this," Cleopatra commented, watching Olivia play with other children. "The mansion was a prison I built myself," Theodora replied. "This is freedom." Miles approached, carrying ice cream for everyone. His relationship with Olivia grew every day, built with patience and respect for the girl's pace. Ambrose, after a period of deep reflection, had surrendered to the authorities and was collaborating with investigations into his supermarket's illegal practices. Dot, who now ran a community physical therapy clinic in the neighborhood, funded by Theodora's new foundation, joined the group. "You know what impresses me most?" the physical therapist commented. "How a tragedy can transform lives in so many different ways." Theodora nodded, watching Olivia run towards her with a radiant smile. The previously silent girl now overflowed with joy, her voice filling every space with life. "Come, Auntie Theo," Olivia called, pulling her hand. "I want to show you something." Leaning on her cane, Theodora followed the girl to a small, newly planted garden. In the center, a simple sign read, "Garden of Hope," because sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. "It was her idea," Cleopatra said, emotional. "She said she learned from you that after the rain, the sun always comes." Theodora felt tears in her eyes, seeing Olivia's old rag doll, now clean and restored, sitting on a miniature bench in the middle of the garden. The doll that had held so many secrets was now just a symbol of transformation and new beginnings. "You know what?" Theodora said, hugging Olivia. "You saved me as much as I saved you." The girl smiled, that pure smile that had melted all the walls Theodora had built over the years. On the horizon, a rainbow began to form as the community celebrated not just the inauguration of a park, but the birth of a new way of living, where the value of people was above the value of money. And so, where a lonely mansion once stood, a community now flourished. Where secrets and resentments once existed, love now grew. The flood that had almost destroyed everything ended up washing away the masks and revealing the true essence of each person. In the end, Theodora discovered that her greatest wealth was not in the possessions she had lost, but in the connections she had built. As the sun set on that special afternoon, Theodora looked at her new family. Not the one money could buy, but the one her heart chose, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly wealthy.